Hey everybody, my name's Ben, we are the Beard Guys, and welcome back to another Rust console video. Aiming in Rust with a controller is much harder than doing it with a mouse and keyboard on PC, so getting your sensitivity settings just right is critical to making the most of PvP situations. I've been tweaking my settings a lot over the early access and now in the full release of Rust console to try and find the best possible setup for my playstyle. As well as telling you my settings, I'm also going to give you some advice on how you can tweak them to get them working perfectly for you. Copying someone else's settings can be a great starting point if you're just starting out or struggling, but often you might need a few little adjustments to get things absolutely spot on. So let's jump in. To start with, we'll just go through my basic sensitivity settings. Just to clarify, I'm playing on Xbox just with a standard controller. I'm not using my Elite controller or any paddles or bindings for this. The aim assist option at the top, you can kind of ignore because that's only going to be enabled if you're playing on an aim assist server. They're not in the game yet as far as I'm aware, but there are going to be servers added where aim assist is going to be an option. At the moment, it's not, and so that is a setting that you can't turn on. As for controller type, I've left that in digital boost. The other option is analog acceleration. They're basically two different ways of how aim acceleration works. I wouldn't worry too much about it. If anyone has any interesting findings from playing with analog, let me know down in the comments, but I find digital boost works just fine for me. Now onto the main ones you're going to have to look at. Camera sensitivity. This is a weird one because this basically affects the speed of pretty much every other setting. So if you have this set on 50 and this set on 130, but you have this set on 300, then these ones are going to feel different to how they do to if you have this on 200. So this is kind of your master sensitivity. So it's a little bit of a weird way of working if you're used to maybe other games like PUBG doesn't really do it quite like that. They're all separate settings. But basically what this top one is going to affect is your camera speed when you're just looking around, not when you're aiming, not when you're sprinting, but just looking around. So the goal here is to have this as fast as possible to be able to spin around and look at targets, to be able to do jump puzzles or navigate, the dome or whatever, but without it being so fast that it's twitchy. And I find 200 for me works quite well with aiming then down on 50 and sprinting up on 130. And what this means is that I feel I can look around fairly quickly in the game. I can spin around 180 kind of quickly. I wish I could do it maybe slightly more quickly, but then it just becomes a bit twitchy on small movements. So I'm able to look around, react to targets fairly quickly, and then when I ADS, when I zoom in, it's just a little bit slower, a little bit more controlled. But again, not too twitchy. There is a bit of an issue at the moment where it does feel like the sensitivity on a bow and on crossbows and on guns feels a little bit different, even if you're just running the same settings. But for me, these worked pretty well. I like to have my sprinting sends up on 130. This just gives me a little bit extra movement speed when I'm running, so I can look around, I can turn a little bit easier. And then when I'm walking, it's just a touch slower and gives me a touch more control. Now, vert sends I've got down on 50. Even on that, I feel that is too high. It still feels quite twitchy, and I wish I could turn it down a little bit more. If you feel that with these set like this that you're aiming and you're looking around is still a little bit twitchy, I'd recommend maybe just tweaking this up or down a bit, camera sensitivity. What I found is that when I play on my Xbox Series X, I have to actually turn my sensitivity down. It feels a lot faster on the Series X. This is my Xbox One X and these settings work quite well. So if you put these in and it feels twitchy as hell, then just try bringing that sends maybe down to 180 or maybe taking this down to 40 and then just see how that feels for you. But as I said at the beginning, these settings should give you a good starting point and then you can make little adjustments to them till you find something that works for you. Camera inertia I've got down on 0. That's just if the camera keeps moving a tiny bit after you stop moving the stick. I wasn't interested in that, so I've turned that off. Boost multiply is basically a bit like aim acceleration. So if you push the stick the whole way, then it will move faster or it will gradually accelerate the speed of movement, rather than if you push the stick the whole way without that setting, it will move at a constant steady speed. So that's aim acceleration basically. If you're interested in that, I've got that that off. As for dead zones, generally you want to have those as low as possible without having stick drift is generally the idea. Some people do like running them higher, but because I'm running quite a new controller here, I'm not on my battered old Xbox Elite controller, I can run these pretty low. Your right stick obviously is your aiming, and the lower you have that, the more responsive your controls are going to feel. Dead zone is basically how much you have to push the stick before it starts reading input. So the lower you have that, the more responsive it's going to be, but also the more twitchy it's going to be if you're a bit clunky and a bit heavy with your thumbs. So maybe if you're not good at micro adjustments on the sticks, then bring those up a little bit. But personally, I'd generally recommend having those as low as you can. And if you put it down low and you're getting stick drift, then just take it up a bit. Inverted Y I have on because I'm old and used to play GoldenEye. If you're old like me, then you probably use that. If you're not, then you probably think that I'm really weird. If you don't play with inverted Y, don't change that. That's not a skill thing. It's just something you either use or you don't. Inverted X, does anyone in the world actually use inverted X axis? Please, if you use inverted X, leave a comment down below, because I don't think a single person in the world uses inverted X. So those are my main settings. Just to run quickly through some other useful things to know. The controller layout thing you've probably seen. This is to turn on free look. If you go up to the top of controls here, select controller layout, it will bring up this and it shows you all of the controls. What you can do on here is you can change the LB button by tapping Y, and you can see there that it's scrolling through a bunch of different options that are bound to the LB button or L1 on PlayStation. And head look hold is kind of the one you want. You can have it as quick drop or quick turn, but head look really is the one you want to see. And what that is, that just means I can run in a straight line, hold down LB, move the right stick, and I can look behind me, I can look down through my see-through arms, I can look up at the sky, and I can look over here or whatever, rather than having to stop and like turn around to see behind me. So it's very, very useful to see if someone's chasing you or just to keep a good bit of vision out while you're running along. So definitely would recommend having that turned on. If you've not turned it on already, then you've probably not watched any tips videos for Rust on console yet. And now just running through the other options in the game, there's auto equip. I've got that off. I find it a bit awkward. It kind of tries to put things in your hotbar that it thinks you might want there. I found it a bit confusing, so I just leave it off. Auto reload you might as well have on. There's a streaming privacy mode. If you want that turned on, it kind of anonymizes the player names and hides your server name. Going back to the controls, there's vibration, is fairly self-explanatory. One that I found quite useful is disable quick chat. So this is if you click in the right stick, it brings up that kind of menu where you can ping messages onto the server. And a lot of people find they accidentally hit it when they're doing PvP and it brings up a menu while you're in a fight and you get killed. If you turn this to on to disable it, that will get rid of that feature, and that is really useful. Auto sprint, I'd recommend having that on. It means when you sprint for several seconds, it will engage auto sprinting and you can let go of the stick. And it also means you can go in your inventory, you can craft, you can look at your map while still sprinting, and that is what it's really, really useful for. Under the HUD menu, there's a couple of little bits you may want to tweak. Stance indicator and inventory indicator basically show you little options at the bottom. You see this little picture of a man at the bottom left of my screen next to the rock, and at the bottom right there's my bag, and that's what those are. It's telling me how much is in my bag and if I am crouched or standing or whatever. Jumping onto the audio tab, I'd recommend disabling the in-game music if you've not already. It's very useful to be able to hear things in this game, be able to hear your enemies. I've also turned down ambient volume a little bit just to help be able to hear stuff like footsteps and gunshots and that kind of thing. Audio mix, I've got on standard and enhanced instincts. I still find the directional audio is questionable at times and is a little bit funny. Hopefully there's going to be improvements made there. If anyone's found any settings that work a bit better on that, let me know, but I haven't really managed to find any secret to having amazing directional audio on Rust on console just yet. And jumping down to graphics, probably a few people wanted to see field of view. I've just got it up on 90. That seems to be working okay for me at the moment. If anyone runs it lower and has any advice on why that's a good option, I'd be interested to see it. I just leave brightness on 1 now. You can't crank up brightness to negate the nighttime anymore. That doesn't really work, so I just leave it on 1 and that works fine for me. Motion blur I've got off because I'm not mad. Depth of field I just have stuff off, and then sharpening and vignette I keep on, and that seems to work just fine for me. So that's all of my settings. Hopefully I didn't waffle on too much and that was something that you found useful. Please let me know down in the comments if you run something differently and you think that's a good idea and it works well for you. Then let me know what you run and why you run it and why it works for you. I'd be really interested to read some of your responses. And if you did enjoy this video, then please think about hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel, because I've got so much Rust console tips and guides and tutorial videos planned, and we've already got a bunch up on YouTube now, so go and check those out and make sure you sub if you want to see lots more stuff like this. So thanks very much for watching. My name's Ben, we are the Beard Guys, and I'll see you next time.